Rata, Ingram. Now this is page 327. People have been very helpful and come in earlier, just to fill in some of the gaps. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. So my name is Rata Ingram. I'm coming to you with sort of 3 roles in Christchurch as a young person in Christchurch. I'm the youngest tram driver in our tram fleet, so a tour guide of the city.
I thought I recognised.
And I'm also a volunteer at Calder Green, which is just at the mouth of the estuary, and I think that's a really important part of our city as well. So that's what I'd like to talk about today, sort of a summary of what I've made in my written submission as well. The first thing that I want to talk about is that the priorities in our city should really be about Christchurch's identity as a city. I say that in the sense that Christchurch has taken a very big hit in the last 7 years. I don't even need to mention it. But we've come a long way, and we need to be focusing on sort of our community and what makes Christchurch interesting in its own right. So when it comes to that, there's the first part of the submission was asking about the progress we've been making in terms of Christchurch, New Zealand, and the events we run in the city. What I think is really important is the stories of Christchurch. It gives people their place in the city, and this really comes through as my work as a tram driver. What really encourages tourists in the city and locals alike is hearing the really interesting quirks about Christchurch and what our history is and where we're going. I think story has always been a very important feature in New Zealand history. The oral history of the Māori people has always been a very grounding component, and so when it comes to events, I think it's most important to focus on what makes Christchurch interesting. I think stuff like the Red Zone 6, which is taking advantage of the Red Zone, unique to Christchurch. It's also encouraging activities. That's the sort of thing I want to see more of. The Antarctic Ice Fest is really another great event in that sense, because Christchurch has this link with the Antarctic, with Scott and Shackleton. We're home to the American-Italian Antarctic projects as well, so we have a lot of resources to draw on. When it comes to what we can say about the Antarctic and our link to it, we've got that connection there. So things like that, what I'd like to see more focus on when it comes to events, less so just drawing in international things that don't really have a link with the city. Now, when that comes to the stadium, we do have the Horncastle Arena, as has just been mentioned in the last submission, and that has been accommodated the likes of Bruce Springsteen. I know there's a lot of dialogue going either way where it comes to a covered arena, and I think that will be important in the future. But for now, we've got something that is serviceable, and we need to focus on building up to an international standard from our roots. We're working on the convention centre at the moment, and the convention centre is a big project to draw in international visitors in the next few years. And I think focusing on these sort of things, building up our infrastructure from the ground up, is where we want to go before we look at building a world-class stadium. When it comes to the rate proposals, I think that it's fair as long as we stick to them. I don't think we should bring in targeted levies which stick to the letter of saying 5.5%, but not really to the spirit of the commitment there. For alternative sources of funding, something that I'm concerned about is the water quality of our rivers. So I thought a good alternative source of funding would perhaps be proposing levies on developers as who are developing, say, in the Westmoreland region, where a lot of silt is actually generated in erosion, which then ends up downstream. It's taking money off people on the east side of Christchurch when the water washes downstream and floods the river. And when it comes to flood protection, what we need to do is, I think, keep that dredging to 3 years, and instead we need to prioritise the long-term measures, rather than a short-term fix of dredging the river, long-term measures of mitigating that that silt build up in the river. So riparian planting, thoughtful subdivision planning, and yeah, we want to keep the river ecology healthy. That is an asset to Christchurch. On that note, I think the funding of roads is something that would be given up to prioritise that as well, because but we can keep them at the level of maintenance they are now, but we also have to look at our underground infrastructure. A lot of that runs underneath the roads. So I feel like prioritising roads now will just mean we need to dig them up later on to fix that underground infrastructure. And a couple of positives. I think the libraries are an excellent asset in Christchurch, and something I'm definitely looking forward to, the opening up of the inner city library. It's a great way to get information about what the council is up to, and of course the books are one of the best parts of the facilities we've got in Christchurch. And another source of funding could come from selling some of what was we were discussing. So selling part of the assets, such as the airport, to free up some funding now, so we can focus on new investments that will bring stuff into the city and prioritise. One last thing that I think is extremely important. The heritage. We lost 80% of our heritage buildings in the city, and they definitely add to the city's identity. So when it comes to Christchurch, it's great to see, like just down Worcester Boulevard here, we've got number 69 Worcester Boulevard, the little brick Georgian building, which will be incorporated in the new hotel they're planning there. So yeah, that should be a consideration when it comes to resource consents, making sure that those heritage buildings are incorporated as best we can, and have that story still threaded through the city's identity, have that character in the city. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, and it is great to have, you know, young people both willing and able, as you are, to make such a powerful submission to our long-term plan. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you all.
It's been great to hear from you.